Syphilis can come from anywhere. You can't blame me. You must have cheated. My wife blamed me after cheating and giving me syphilis. I planned to leave her with the disease and no money, while I got treated. I had been married to Elena for 8 years. Sometimes it seemed incredible to me how time flies. 8 years is enough to feel like you know by heart the silences, the gestures, and even the quirks of the person sleeping next to you. Our life in the upper-middle-class residential neighborhood looked like a perfect picture from the outside. We had economic stability, a comfortable routine, Friday dinners with friends, and the occasional trip each year. I worked as an engineer at an industrial projects company, and my head was usually submerged in calculations, deadlines, and meetings. I always considered myself a methodical man, someone who needs the pieces to fit. Elena, on the other hand, was different. Her energy was more erratic, more volatile. While at the beginning of our marriage, I found her vitality fascinating. Over the years, I had started to notice a restless glint in her eyes, as if everything we had together was no longer enough for her. I tried to attribute that distance to stress, to the inevitable routine, to what they say happens to all couples over the years. I didn't want to accept there was something more. The truth is, I took refuge in my work. Elena took refuge in something I still didn't understand. There were nights when she fell asleep before I got home, mornings when she went to the gym with an enthusiasm that contrasted with her listlessness towards almost everything else. And although that gap was growing, I kept telling myself it was normal. That's how long marriages are. One Saturday morning, while I was getting ready for a round of golf with some colleagues, I put on a freshly ironed white shirt. The sun was coming through the window, illuminating the room, when I noticed something that shouldn't be there, a fresh, bright bloodstain on the collar of the garment. I stood still. The blood wasn't dry or old. It was recent, as if it had appeared just seconds before. I immediately took off the shirt and went straight to the bathroom mirror. Right where the fabric had brushed against my collarbone, I discovered a small, reddish, round, moist lesion. I leaned in closer, touching it with my fingertip. It didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It was just there as if it had sprouted from nowhere. It must be a scratch, I told myself. Maybe an insect bite or a minor allergic reaction. But something in my stomach turned. I had always been meticulous about my health, even obsessive about certain hygiene details. I didn't smoke. I drank just enough at gatherings. I exercised. My body, to me, was like a clock that needed to be kept tuned. That's why that mark, however small, didn't fit any logical pattern. On the green, while I was playing, the discomfort became constant. Every time I moved my arm or sweat brushed the area, I felt a dull ache. At one point, I scratched it insistently and noticed it was somewhat swollen. I played the rest of the game with a divided mind. One part of me was calculating shots and distances. The other was reviewing a mental list of possibilities. None of them convinced me. When I got home that afternoon, I took out my desk magnifying glass, the one I used to check blueprints with tiny details, and stood in front of the mirror again. The magnified image confirmed what I already suspected. It wasn't a scratch, it was an ulcer. I stood still for several minutes, contemplating it, as if that observation could give me answers, but all I managed to feel was an emptiness in my chest. That night, while Elena was settling into bed with a book, I gathered the courage to mention it. I asked her if she had seen any insects near me lately, because I thought maybe something had bitten me on the neck. She looked up for just a moment, without much interest, and replied with a maybe, said with a disinterest that hit me like a wall. Nothing more. She went back to burying herself in the pages as if my question were irrelevant. I stared at the ceiling for a good while with a feeling of strangeness I couldn't shake. 2 days later, unable to ignore it, I made an appointment with my family doctor. It wasn't the first time I had visited him as a precaution. He knew about my obsession with detecting any anomaly early. He examined me with a flashlight, felt the area, and asked me a couple of questions about my recent activities. His face changed immediately, adopting a seriousness I rarely saw in him. He told me, in a firm voice, that it was not a bite or a scratch, that it was a primary lesion of syphilis. What I had there was called a chancre. The ground shifted beneath me. I could barely react. I answered with disbelief, with a lump in my throat, that it couldn't be, that I was in a monogamous relationship, that there was no way something like this could be happening to me. The doctor adjusted his glasses and explained that syphilis usually manifests with these ulcers in an incubation period of 10 to 90 days after infection. He added that the most common route of transmission was direct sexual contact. He spoke in medical terms, with the precision of someone who had seen it hundreds of times, but every word sounded like a hammer blow to my head. I don't remember much else he said. Technical words, recommendations, data. I only heard an echo inside my head. Syphilis. He told me to get a blood test to confirm, and I did it immediately. A part of me, the rational and meticulous part that had always defined me, still clung to the idea that it was all a mistake. The wait for the result was unbearable. Every night, I went to bed with a knot in my chest. I would look at Elena sleeping next to me and wonder if I should tell her, if I should warn her. But her recent indifference, that coldness that seemed to have settled between us for months, drilled into my head. I had never had a sexually transmitted disease. I had never been with another woman since I met her. So, how on earth had this reached me? Logic pushed me to a dark place. If I didn't bring it, someone else did. And that person could only be her. Finally, the result came. I opened it with trembling hands. Positive. I sat in silence with the paper in my hand, unable to react. It was as if my entire body had frozen. A part of me wanted to cry, another wanted to scream, but all I did was remain motionless, trying to understand how something like this could have entered my life. In that instant, without knowing it yet, everything I believed to be stable, secure, predictable, had begun to collapse. That night I decided to confront Elena. I had spent the entire day with the word syphilis hammering in my head, with the results sheet in my pocket as a reminder that something in our life had been pierced by betrayal. There was no room for beating around the bush. I watched her during dinner. When we put the plates aside, I looked at her intently and let out what I had been holding back for days. I told her that I had tested positive and that I needed her to tell me the truth. If she was cheating on me. Her first reaction was a nervous blink, but she quickly composed herself. She immediately denied it with a confidence that almost seemed rehearsed. I was on the verge of losing my temper. She told me it couldn't have come from her, that I must have contracted it in the past, and it was only now coming to light. Her words were cold, calculated, and the most disconcerting thing was the way she tried to turn everything back on me. Elena, the results are clear, I replied, but she interrupted me in a louder, almost strained tone. Syphilis can come from anywhere. You can't blame me. That could have happened to you years ago, or in some place you don't even remember. Don't accuse me of something like that, because it's not true. Her insistence was absolute. She swore up and down that she had never cheated on me, that ours was still a monogamous relationship, that I was wrong. Hearing her repeat it with such firmness left me in a strange state, as if trapped between rage and doubt. My rational mind knew what the doctors said, but her words, charged with that vehemence only she could project, opened a crack. I went to the pharmacy to buy the antibiotics I had been prescribed. I walked out with the bag in my hand, focusing on my steps, when suddenly I bumped head-on into someone. When I looked up, I recognized him. Paolo, a distant acquaintance, someone with whom I had shared superficial chats at the gym and some casual encounters over the years. He smiled, but it wasn't a sincere smile. "Man, it's been a while since I've seen you. How have you been?" he said, trying to sound cheerful. I barely responded with a vague gesture, my head still full of thoughts. I asked him how he had been, and that's when his expression changed. He got serious, lowered his voice, and dropped a confession that struck me like a thunderbolt. "Look, I'm going to tell you this because I'm worried. I've just been diagnosed with syphilis, and I don't know how it happened." The sound of that word hit me for the second time. I felt the bag of medicine almost slip from my hands. I had it too, and now Paolo was confirming what seemed like an impossible coincidence. I said nothing about my own diagnosis. I let him talk, with a lump in my throat that prevented me from reacting. He continued, almost venting. "I'm going to have to put my normal life on hold for a bit, especially the gym, until I recover. It's a pain, but I have no other choice." In that instant, my mind, always trained to solve problems, began to put the pieces together. I remembered that my wife, Elena, spent a lot of time at the gym. I decided to ask with a forced calm. "Hey, Paolo, sorry for the question. Which gym do you go to?" He didn't hesitate to answer. "To Fitness First, it's the only one near me." That sentence pierced me more than any diagnosis. The same gym Elena went to almost every day, from which she would return exhausted, sometimes with the excuse that she had trained too hard, sometimes arriving late, as if time slipped away from her there. In that moment, I understood everything. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with an unbearable weight. I didn't need any more proof. Elena was cheating on me with Paolo, an old acquaintance. The worst part is she couldn't tell me to my face. She had denied the infidelity tooth and nail, but the reality was all too clear. Paolo had no idea that the woman he was sleeping with was my wife. To him, it was just another affair, faceless beyond the moment. But to me, his confession became living evidence of what Elena had so insistently hidden from me. I said goodbye to Paolo without showing anything on my face. I shook his hand, heard him say he hoped to recover soon and that it would be a matter of patience. I answered only in monosyllables. I walked to my car with a firm step, with a cold certainty running through my veins. On that journey, I understood something definitive. My wife had not only cheated on me, but she had dragged our life into an infected territory, literally and symbolically. The betrayal was not limited to the physical, it was now written in my blood, in my body. And the worst of all was that we were connected, she, Paolo, and I, by a repulsive secret that should never have existed. I didn't stop to cry, or scream, or seek comfort. I just moved forward with the conviction that the truth, however painful, was now on the table. The deceit was no longer a suspicion. It was no longer a matter of believing her words or not. It was a done deal. Elena was not just my distant wife, not just the woman with whom I had shared 8 years. I now saw her as the person who had silently destroyed our life, covering herself with excuses and denials. I didn't need any more answers from her. I didn't need her to confess what was already clear. The only thing left was to decide what to do with that truth. I walked home with firm steps, with a cold and precise mind, prepared to face what I had to face. When I entered, I found her in the living room sitting on the couch as if she were reading something, but when she looked up, I saw instant surprise. She said nothing, just looked at me, and in that silence was all the fear, the disbelief, and perhaps for the first time, a glimmer of guilt. I sat down in front of her. I told her directly that I knew everything, that she had been having sex with a man named Paolo, who to both our surprise turned out to be an acquaintance, that she was cheating on me in the worst possible way. Her face turned pale, her eyes widened, and her mouth tried to form words that wouldn't come out. There was no possible defense against the evidence I had in my mind and the data I had collected, the syphilis diagnosis for both of us, the shared gym, the coincidences that were no longer coincidences. I explained that Paolo had confessed his illness to me and that everything fit perfectly, that they had seen each other, had been in close contact, and I was certain that she was also infected. If Paolo and I have syphilis, you have it too, I told her, letting it hang in the air. The sentence was not an accusation, but a wounded fact, a drawn line that could not be denied. She began to cry almost immediately, a choked and desperate cry. She started to justify herself, to talk quickly, trying to explain, trying to dismantle the evidence that was already irrefutable. I didn't want any of this, she said between sobs. It was a mistake. I didn't want to get you sick. I didn't want to get sick myself. I didn't want this to happen. Please, forgive me. I stood still, listening to her, without interrupting, without showing any emotion that might give her some comfort. Every word that came out of her mouth confirmed to me that she had been aware of her actions, that she had chosen to continue regardless of the risk, regardless of the betrayal it implied. No plea could soften what she had done, nor could words erase the damage caused. Finally, I told her I would file for divorce, and that she would be left with absolutely nothing, that I never wanted to hear from her ever again, that she had betrayed me and thrown away 8 years of marriage that were real to me, but meant nothing to her. I didn't need any more explanations, or apologies, or empty promises. I knew how to move. I had the right contacts, and I was not going to let the justice system or the courts grant her benefits she didn't deserve. Her crying intensified, but I didn't react. The decision was made. The next day, I went straight to my lawyer. Not only did I start the divorce process, protecting every asset, every account, and every property, I also filed a formal complaint for culpable injury, attaching my diagnosis and the proven contagion. I knew it might not prosper in court, but I didn't care. What I wanted was for it to be recorded in an official file that Elena had transmitted a venereal disease to her own husband, for her to be stained on paper, for her name to carry that shame. The divorce was a surgical process. Every document reviewed, every clause prepared to close any loophole for her. When it was all over, Elena was left out of the house with no access to accounts, no savings, and with the weight of the complaint on her shoulders. I, on the other hand, started treatment immediately. I underwent the series of penicillin injections, endured the initial discomforts, and followed every medical checkup to the letter. My body responded well. Within a few weeks, the test confirmed that the infection was neutralized. From Elena, however, the rumors began to arrive. Mutual friends said she wasn't following the treatment, that she was skipping medical appointments, that she didn't even have enough money for antibiotics. Some said she would show up at the gym looking haggard, with marked skin and unkempt hair, looking for Paolo, who had cut her out of his life as soon as he learned the diagnosis. No one wanted to be near her. 3 months passed when I saw her with my own eyes. I was leaving the office one afternoon, and there she was, waiting for me on the sidewalk. She was wearing an old coat, too big for her body that now seemed withered. Her face had dark circles, her eyes were sunken, and her lips were dry. As soon as she saw me, she clumsily lunged towards me, extending trembling hands. "Please," she whispered. "I need help. I have no one else." The sour smell of her breath, the pallor of her skin, the desperation in her voice were living proof of what her own negligence had caused. I didn't answer. I looked at her for a few seconds just to burn into my memory what she had become, the shadow of the woman who was once my wife. Then I kept walking without turning my head, without giving her a single word. I heard her sob behind me, but I didn't stop. That was the last time I saw her. I got cured. I rebuilt my life step by step. She, on the other hand, was trapped in a sick body, in a present marked by misery and loneliness. And although justice did not pass a sentence, life itself took care of sentencing her much worse than any court could have done.